A very good afternoon to you. How lovely to see you all, and welcome to another fab episode of our tea and training. And we're going to take you on a little tour through a rather lovely itinerary that we created. Can't quite believe it was back in September 2019, but it's such a fabulously compact and varied itinerary that I thought it would be really useful for you to have a little look. So let's I think we've got some more people joining, so let's jump in there. But the great thing about this itinerary is if you have some people who maybe just want to add on 2 or 3 days after a cruise or before a cruise, there are little chunks of activities, or it's a beautiful 12-day itinerary that works all in one. So we'll share some of the share the highlights with you, and I don't know why I can't change the screen. There we go. So again, a little reminder about our Humphreys Promise, and it actually reminds me to tell you that we've been doing some work on the website, because we wanted to make it easier to signpost and easier to find what it is you're looking for. So when you get a chance, I'd be really grateful if you could have a look at it, and even better if you have a moment to share some of your thoughts and feedback. We would absolutely love to hear it. But it's all all driven by the Humphreys Promise to make the most and protect, prolong and preserve our wonderful countryside by enabling people to find the very, very best bits. Now, just a little bit of news. I hope that you celebrated your side of the Atlantic as much as we did this side of the Atlantic about the first flights taking off. And we had fabulous footage of a BA flight and a Virgin flight synchronizing their takeoff times from the 2 runways at Heathrow, or 2 of the runways at Heathrow. It was absolutely glorious, and I think shows just how incredibly important this travel, our transatlantic travel, is to both of us. So it's just wonderful that we can come back again. And rather pertinently, as you will see a little bit later in the presentation, we're very excited that Goodwood have announced some of their dates, which is just brilliant. So we've been waiting for the revival dates, because we're planning a few itineraries around that, and they finally come out and said that they are on the 16th to the 18th of September. So if you have any clients, thanks Katie, yes we are too, if you have any clients that are just love their cars, classic or otherwise, and even better, just love getting dressed up into the old sort of 50s fashion, getting the old victory rolls and all that sort of thing, we can make all of that happen for them, because Goodwood Revival is going to be back up and running. And I'm going down there in a couple of weeks actually, so I'll be able to update you about any other changes as well. So, quick overview of this amazing itinerary. Now, we put this together for the most lovely couple. They were coming over to the UK to celebrate their golden wedding anniversary, which was just so exciting, but a huge sense of responsibility, because obviously it was an incredibly important trip for them that they had been looking forward to for a long time. So we had to make sure that every single detail was managed completely, and I'm really delighted, because they did have a wonderful time. We loved all the texts and the messages and everything that we got at the end of every day, and we must have done something right, because they are coming back next August 2022. We're putting together a 32-day itinerary for them next year, which is really exciting, so I'll share that with you one of these days as well. But let's just sort of talk through the days. Now, what was so lovely about this itinerary is a really good use of time and geography. So they started off in the Chilterns and stayed. They chose to stay at Cliveden, and obviously, you know, there are some lovely hotels in that area. And you'll see that the types of experiences that they enjoyed while they were staying at Cliveden, and just how convenient it is. Then they moved down into the New Forest, so down by the coast. They stayed at Chewton Glen, another iconic hotel, and had a glorious time and made great use of their location, as you'll see. And then obviously they could not come to England without a trip to the Cotswolds, and they had a few days in Broadway. So we minimized the traveling time between the three, as you'll see, but it was a really lovely use of time. So when they started off, I went over and met them on the morning that they arrived, and not surprisingly, they were a little jaded, long flight and all the rest of it. So their first afternoon, they kept it really simple and had a glorious champagne afternoon tea, and just cruised up and down the beautiful stretch of the River Thames just by Cliveden. So they had 2 or 3 hours on board. The sun was shining. We had arranged that for them, obviously. But it was a lovely, gentle introduction to the time that they were going to have. They then went for something a little more grand. And as you know, we love Downton Abbey, otherwise known as, we should call it, Highclere Castle. We worked really closely with them to create incredibly personal tours for the visitors. And this is exactly what Linda and Dave chose to do, which was just wonderful. So they arrived, they were greeted by their personal butler, and I was lucky enough, as you can see here, to be shown round by Lady Carnarvon. They were greeted by their butler, taken through into the beautiful main hall, and had tea and biscuits. And Lady Carnarvon was kind enough to come down and say hello, and she greeted them, wished them a happy anniversary, had a bit of a chat over a coffee. And then one of the curators took them on their amazing tour. They were Downton Abbey fans, but what they really wanted to see and hear about was all of the history and splendor and the stories of the previous earls and Lady Carnarvons and so on. And as you can see just here in the smoking room, as it's called, I mean, the family portraits and the paintings are quite extraordinary. And the lovely thing about Highclere, and you'll see it as we come into the drawing room, is there's all of the history there and so on, but equally, as you go around the room, there are all of the lovely family pictures and all the things that you would expect to see in family pictures of children playing and posing and Christmases and all of those lovely things. So Linda and Dave really made the most of their fabulous time there, and they also enjoyed. They had lunch. And then in the afternoon, they went over to Cogg's Manor and Bampton, which you may remember possibly are and here you can see all the photographs just here. And as you can see, it was winter time because there's a beautiful poinsettia there as well that we were filming this. So Bampton and Cogg's Manor are the beautiful external locations of Downton. So they had quite a splendid regal day, having a look round, and they loved all of the sort of pomp and the sense of history and so on as they were going through. Now, the rest of this video, plus a few more episodes, we will send in our in the follow-up to you, so you can have a bit of a look round and a proper listen, actually, to Lady Carnarvon, who is so passionate about her home. She loves the history. She loves all of her talking about the ancestors and so on. It's magical to listen to. So, sorry, I'm having some technical issues here today. Right. So the following day, as you saw in the itinerary, they went from a castle to a palace. So we're really exploring the whole English history and so on. And they did the full-on private tour at Blenheim. Now, we can't quite get access to the Duke and Duchess of Marlborough as we can to the Earl and Countess of Carnarvon. But even so, they were taken around the Duke and his family's private apartments with one of the butlers who has worked for the Duke and his family for many years, so can share all those wonderful secrets and histories and so on. The staterooms are quite extraordinary. And you can see, you'll be able to see some of them here. I know how to turn the volume off this time. You'll see some of them here, but so the after they had coffee and pastries in the orangery, they were then taken through to the staterooms, which are unbelievable. The portraits and the art and just all the stories behind the building of this amazing palace is quite extraordinary. That main door that I'm just coming through there apparently is a replica of the main door to the city of Warsaw. And it's I mean, it really is quite beautiful. And this is the main atrium that you see as you go in. And there's just that real feeling of just how important the first Duke of Marlborough was. He'd won this amazing battle against our traditional enemies, the French, but obviously we all love each other now. But back in the day, we weren't such friends. And this was Queen Anne's gift to the first Duke of Marlborough, to give him this plot of land, and they built this quite incredible palace. Now, some say that Blenheim Palace is actually more splendid than some of our royal palaces. I couldn't possibly comment on that, obviously, but it really does personify the word breathtaking. It's quite extraordinary, and you just want to stand there and look up and round and every which way, because it's magnificent. And they've even got a copy of the note that the first Duke of Marlborough sent to his wife Sarah when she was sitting there very anxiously waiting for news of the battle. And in this note he asked her to tell Queen Anne that he'd been victorious and the French were defeated, and the War of Spanish Succession was ours, which was all very exciting. And there's an amazing statue of Queen Anne in the main library, which is beautiful. And again, there's a whole sequence of a whole sequence of episodes at Blenheim Palace, and we'll send you the links to those. That's my favorite room. I just love that library. It's quite beautiful, really is wonderful. And I haven't been there actually since COVID, so it's definitely time to go back, that's for sure. So then they had all the pomp and glamour and splendor and all of that wonderful history, and then it was time to go exploring the countryside. And we took them to one of our favorite equestrian centres, and they had a wonderful guided ride. Both of them have ridden before. They're not hugely experienced riders, but they said seeing some of the children's countryside from horseback was utterly magical. And because it was September time, the colours were starting to change, and it was just lovely. And then we booked them into one of our favorite traditional pubs for a good lunch. So a slightly easier day, but they had a glorious time. They then spent the day between Henley, where Humphreys is based and where we live, which is a beautiful riverside market town, as you know, and Marlow, which is just 5 miles down the road. Again, is on the river. You can see the picture of Marlow Bridge on the bottom right there. And they just explored the history and the stories and some of the beautiful old historical buildings, just to get a sense of what it's like to live in the British countryside. So just learning some of the stories and so on. The bit that was a little bit special was they did drive around in a rather fabulous classic car, roof down because the sun was out, and they had a beautiful riverside afternoon tea over at Phyllis Court, which is a lovely old private members club. So it was just a lovely, simple day, guided through the very best bits of these two beautiful market riverside towns, which was just lovely. Then we did a bit more history and a bit more aristocracy and royalty and all of those good things. And they had an amazing day in Windsor, starting off with about spending an hour relaxing in their beautiful carriage with their brilliant driver, telling them all the stories of all of the different buildings and places in Windsor Great Park, before taking them to the castle gates, where they met their guide for a fabulous tour of Windsor Castle. And then, because they'd done a little bit of walking around, we took them down to meet their skipper, and they did a lovely river cruise. Now, the stretch, the Thames around Windsor is very different from the Cliveden Reach, and again is very different from the Henley Reach. So it's just lovely seeing these towns and places from the perspective of the river. But they felt suitably regal and royal by the end of the day, which was just wonderful. So having been to Windsor, we planned the itinerary, as I said, to minimize travel. So they were traveling south from Cliveden to Windsor, and then they just continued their journey down into the New Forest to go to Chewton Glen. Now, they are passionate about motor racing and classic car racing and so on. So the fact that they were coming in September meant we built their itinerary around Goodwood, which we can obviously do with all of the fabulous events, whether it's Chelsea Flower Show, Henley Regatta or Royal Ascot. And they really went to town. They got all dressed up. They had the best seats in the house and fabulous food and wine and so on. But they got to meet some of the amazing individuals who own the cars or have some historical relationship with classic cars. So they didn't only just stand and watch, they really got immersed and felt like they were part of it. And so much so that when they come over next year, they're not just doing one day, they're doing 2 days at Goodwood Revival because they loved it so much. So that they're very excited about that. And then they had a slightly quieter day because it was quite a busy itinerary. And they did go over and spend a couple of days at a fabulous polo centre down in the New Forest, and got out on some polo ponies and mastered a little bit of stick management and so on. We didn't get too competitive, but they had a lovely time, and they've watched polo from time to time, so they really enjoyed actually learning a little bit more about what goes into it. And then this is something we really do recommend for anybody staying around that area. The New Forest is quite extraordinary. It's a complete misnomer because it's one of the oldest forests in the country, so there is absolutely nothing new about it at all. But there are ponies and animals that wander across the road, and the little villages and towns that you drive through are quite extraordinary. And we can either, I think with Linda and Dave, we gave them a recommended route, and they decided they wanted to drive themselves in a lovely old classic car. But for many of our guests, they actually want to make the most of the time and enjoying looking around. So so they opt for the chauffeur. Whichever way round, it's just such a lovely place to have a drive around. Stop for a lovely pub lunch and all that sort of thing. And then we managed the itinerary, so they drove up from Chewton Glen via Stonehenge, because it's pretty much en route up to the Cotswolds, and they were good early risers, so they were very happy to do a sunrise tour. They went in, they did the inner circle tour, so they were standing in the middle of the stones with dear David, who is our favorite Stonehenge guide. And you might remember he did join us, golly, I think it was about 6 months ago when we were talking about Stonehenge. So they had a wonderful time with him, really learning about the history and so on. They decided they didn't want to do Avebury and Woodhenge and so on, but obviously that is very much an option. They decided that they wanted to go and have a little wander around Bath. So they arrived there. We'd arranged a lovely lunch for them. Frampton's is one of our favourite restaurants, but the Pump Room have really upped their game, actually, and the lunches there are very good. So they had a lovely afternoon pootling around Bath, a private tour of the Holborn Museum, as you can see. They didn't do the cocktail making, but when people stay over in Bath, there is the most fabulous gin distillery there, and it's a real experience to get to do all the mixology and then taste your creation, and hopefully like it. And I mean, obviously this itinerary can be done at any time of the year, and although sadly Bath Christmas Market isn't happening this year, the dreaded C word, but we're confident it will be back in full force next year. And there's a Humphreys TV about the Bath Christmas Market as well, which is just lovely. So they then drove from Bath and stayed up at the Glyn Arms in Broadway. So they really did choose all of the iconic hotels for that trip. And they just loved the contrast, because Chewton Glen is quite relatively new and light and airy and high ceilings and so on. Whereas the Glyn Arms, being I think it's a 15th century coaching inn, all the beams and the low ceilings and everything is just beautiful, absolutely beautiful, and all very sort of creaky and oldie worldy. So they did love that. And interestingly, the following day after they'd arrived at Ligon, they said this was one of the absolute highlights. They said the private tour of Highclere and this cycling tour in the Cotswolds was extraordinary. Now, they're both in their early 70s, so we politely suggested that they might enjoy an e-bike rather than a normal one, which they grabbed with both hands. And they said they felt like they were more in their 40s than 70s as they cycled up and down all these hills with no effort whatsoever. But one of the real highlights, we've got a fabulous cycle guide over in the Cotswolds, and he timed their tour. So they went over a rather beautiful little Cotswolds bridge and just stopped to have a quick drink and so on, because the guide knew there was a steam train that was going to come underneath the bridge. And it was one of the absolute highlights of the trip. They took all sorts of photos and so on. They not only had lunch, a pub lunch, they also stopped for afternoon tea on the basis they've been quite active. We can happily arrange a picnic, but they just loved being so up close and personal to the Cotswolds countryside, and there isn't any better way to do it. Well, maybe on horseback, but cycling around with somebody who can show you the highlights is really, really very special. And then they decided to sit back and relax, and we did have a chauffeur for this one, and they explored a little bit further afield than they could get on their bikes, and we planned a lovely route through some of the better known places, but also some of the real little secrets that are hidden away and therefore a bit quieter. And we've got some real favourite little pubs and tea rooms and so on that we recommend. So they saw a little bit more of the Cotswolds. And then for their final day, they were coming back across to London. So we said, we can bring you across to London and you can sit back and relax, because we thought they'd done quite a bit. But they decided they wanted to stop in Oxford en route, which is quite a good spot actually between Broadway and London. It's probably about halfway. They had a little wander around a couple of the colleges, which was just lovely. They decided to do a river cruise and go punting, which was wonderful. So they had a skipper for both. So they weren't going to. I was a little worried about anybody falling into the river, but they loved. Obviously, the punting is so much slower and so on, but they got to see more of the sights from the river cruise. And then we drove them into London. They had that evening, they were flying back the following morning. That evening, they just wanted to see the crown jewels. So we arranged an amazing private tour of the crown jewels for them. And there were all sorts of comments about their journey being like the crown jewels, because there were so many beautiful elements to it that they just loved every moment. And as I say, loved every moment so much that they're coming back in August next year. Again, building the itinerary around Goodwood Revival, and they're spending their first 2 or 3 nights in our fabulous new hotel in Henley, which I'm very excited about. This is a lovely nighttime picture of the relay in Henley. There are about 42 bedrooms, and all of those windows that you can see there on the picture look across, look over onto the river. It's the most beautiful location, and they've just spent millions doing it up, and it really is just wonderful. And they're spending some time in England. They're going across to Ireland, up to Scotland, and then back down again. So they're doing quite a trip, which is very exciting. So I hope that's been really useful, just to see the sort of things that can be created over a period of days. And the reason I love this itinerary so much is that there's a real mixture of the real splendor and history and the aristocratic side of things with Highclere and Blenheim, through to the simplicity of a river cruise or a cycle tour, or driving through the New Forest. It really is just lovely. So we are just working on a I couldn't agree more, Todd. Yeah, I think daily life should be like that. We quite often say that actually when we're putting together these itineraries, that if only life were like this every day, but then maybe we wouldn't appreciate them quite so much. But thank you so much for joining us. We are just putting together a schedule of the next tea and training events. We've got some lovely things to share with you. So we will be sending that over to you at the end of the week, and really look forward. And we are, as you know, doing these now every 2 weeks. So 2 weeks are, today is the 24th, I think. Is that right? Yeah, the 24th. So please put that in your diaries, and we really look forward to seeing you, and we will come back to you at the end of the week and let you know what we'll be talking about. So thanks for joining us. See you soon. Oh, thanks, love. That's lovely comments. Appreciate that. Thank you. See you then. Bye-bye.